I'm Senator John Coghill. I'm from the Fairbanks North Pole area. Raised in Nenana as the little village that I was raised in, and moved to Fairbanks to court a young lady and ended up living there for the last 39 years with her.
Well, thank you for being here with us today on Alaska Matters Radio. And, of course, we broadcast around the peninsula, the Kenai Peninsula, and up into and towards your area, I guess you'd say, with Delta Junction, Fort Greely.
Yes.
But, Senator, everywhere I've looked of late, everything I look at, the News Miner, ADN, Juneau Empire, wherever I'm looking at news, I'm finding your name, and I'm finding myself saying, right on. I like it. I like what you're standing for, and I don't know where you'd like to go in this conversation. You tell me where to go, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about Senate Bill 176 and the guns on campus. That seems to be getting some attention right now. What was the impetus behind that bill, if you will, and where do you think it's going to go?
Sure. Senate Bill 176 is a project actually brought to me by an intern. I actually have a university student from the University of Alaska Anchorage campus who came to work with me as an intern this year, and he is with a student coalition that has this as one of their prime issues. So he asked if he could put the bill in and if I would mind working with him. I said I'd be glad to. And since then, we found out that the university has made regulations that really supersede state law. And so we asked the authority question, do they have the authority to do that? And I think that's an open question. At this point, then how do we align state law with university needs, right? And so they have probably regulated inappropriately concealed or regular carry on campus. And they have some issues there. But so to his credit, this young man, Hans is his name, who is an intern, has done a lot of legal research, a lot of national research on various different campuses like Colorado. I think Idaho just passed a similar law. Certainly, there's a couple of tests that you have to make kind of legally. There has to be a compelling state interest to regulate or somehow challenge or change your fundamental right to keep and bear arms, because our Constitution says, it shall not be infringed. But if there's a compelling interest, then the state can make that. And they've done that in the cases of daycares. They've done that in the cases of public schools, where it's K-12, some places like bars. So they've said there is a reasonable and compelling interest. Probably the standard for that is the least restrictive means for that compelling interest to be implemented. And so those two legal standards are what we're applying as we're moving forward. So we're trying to get them to the table, tell us what those compelling interests are, and what are those least restrictive means. And I think you'll see that we're probably moving along pretty good. But, for me, I can tell you as a legislator, it's great to watch a young man who is a political science major taking on a weighty issue that is constitutional, taking his principle-based approach for the fundamentals of our society. And for me, one of the 7 principles that I operate under is, does the bill adhere to constitutions of the state of Alaska and our United States? And certainly he does there.
That's terrific. I love that young involvement as well, and the fact that you were willing to mentor and help shepherd this through is terrific. And I think that's really good politics. So much of politics gets a bad reputation or black eye. I think in this case that should be applauded no matter where it ends up. Senator, from my perspective, what I see is a couple of different sides to this debate as it's being played out in the court of public opinion, which is the emotional side of it. Like, yes, from my cold, dead fingers, will you take my guns? So that's number one. And then number two is the other side, which guns kill, and that fundamental misunderstanding that a gun in and of itself isn't dangerous until it's put in the wrong or uneducated hands. And so I suspect that some of what you're debating on, or at least the battle going uphill on this particular bill, will be that fear of the unknown and people that don't know about guns.
Well, that is true. That is true, Chris. There's no doubt that it's an emotional debate because, you have deep philosophically held issues, plus the fear of the unknown. The There are some people that say having somebody walking around with a gun is dangerous to me. But we have compelling and good history showing that if people are responsible citizens carrying firearms, that they actually make this a safer world to live in.
That's correct. And I think no posted placard has ever stopped somebody from violating a law of their choice. And I never can understand creating these gun-free zones with a couple of exceptions. You mentioned one, the daycare, and, of course, airports are a great exception to that rule.
But then look at the security you have, whether it's the only place that I think we don't do well in security is our K-12 schools, because we have certainly declared them a safe gun-free zone. And we try to limit people coming in the front door by making them check in and everything. But the reality is, if you have somebody who has got a mental disability or deranged even, or wicked to the core, they can bust through a window, and they have, and they will continue to do it. So we're probably going to have to keep looking at how do we keep our schools. If we're going to say we guarantee your safety, we're probably going to have to step up and do that.
Moving on to Proposition 1, the oil tax restructuring, if that passes, my understanding is if Proposition 1 passes, SB 21, which was put into law last year, would be repealed, and the state of Alaska would go back to a former tax structure. Am I framing that issue correctly?
Yes, you're exactly right, Christopher. And one of the things that we'll do is it'll take us back to what is called the ACES tax, which everybody knew had a progressivity or a kind of an escalating factor in it, that when the price went up, the state took more. We thought that would be fair in that we also gave escalating some credits. But there was a big disconnect between the ability to produce at that escalating level and what we were given credits for. The credits were given for exploration that could not get to production because we had this big cliff they had to climb. So SB 21 changed that and said, we'll still take a high take. Instead of taking 25%, we'll take 35%, but we'll change that escalator so that people can actually make solid investments knowing that prices will fluctuate, but they have some stability. So if we go back to the old tax, there's a couple of things that will happen. First of all, we have disincentivized anybody to come and invest in our oil fields. That's one of the things that we heard loud and clear. We had priced ourselves out of the market internationally, and especially with the oil boom going into shale areas in the lower 48, we definitely are not going to get anybody investing in Alaska, which is a higher cost. The other thing that it's going to do, though, that I think a lot of people need to keep aware of, we're trying to get our natural gas off the North Slope into some market, too. If the people of Alaska turn that tax back to the old ACES tax, the people who were going to bring cash to invest in Alaska are going to say, why would we invest in a pipeline if the people of Alaska can change the policy based on initiative? And so I think you're going to say the volatility is just too high for us to invest. So I hope that people of Alaska, as they deliberate on this, will think through to have a stable regime. Let the legislature deal with it. That's your lawmaking body. But I can tell you it turns into an emotional debate, much like the gun debate. Trying to get down to the real facts is going to be very difficult during a campaign year, I would think.
I agree, and please, I mean, that's absolutely what was on the top of my mind when you were talking was like, but wait a minute, Senator Coghill, what about the people burning $5 million, is it $5 million or $5 billion checks on the beach? These people that are very much at the shirt sleeve with the emotion of this, quote, giveaway. Yeah. How do we combat that? I guess you've already answered it. I mean, it's a disincentive. If we don't leave this in place, we'll disincentivize investment. Without the investment, we all lose.
Probably the other thing is they talk about a giveaway. The fact is that's just not true. But they keep saying it over and over and over again as if somehow that's what it means. Under the last tax stream, the scheme, the ACES, we are already giving money away because we have incentivized credits to a huge degree that are never going to enter into production unless we give them the reason to go into production. So we've already given away billions of dollars trying to incentivize people to come work in Alaska, which was successful. But our barrier to go into production was so high that they quit investing. And we knew it, they knew it, everybody knew it, but now the giveaway language gets stuck in, and it becomes kind of that urban legend. Right now, under either one of those tax structures, we're about the same at this oil price. Now, if it goes back up to 140 because of the escalator, that's true. But because of the escalator, nobody's going to invest in Alaska during those prices.
Marijuana and minimum wage, both on the ballot here in August. And just, wow, this is a really unique political landscape this year, or do you think that's just my perspective?
That's true. Everybody's running for election. We got a U.S. senatorial. Everybody in the House of Representatives is running. We have a congressman running. We have a governor running. And 2/3 of the state senate is running. Plus these very, out of the ordinary bills. So the marijuana, we don't need more drug relaxation. We already having a hard time in our workforce with people not being able to pass UI tests already. Our workforce is already stressed because of both drugs and alcohol. We don't need to add to the problem. Believe me, we don't need to add. So to me, the answer is no on that. I understand my libertarian guys saying, give us a liberty. But I can tell you, for those of us who drive regularly, that's one more thing we'll have to watch for on the road. It's bad enough that you never know when that drunk driver's coming at you. Next, there's going to be the high driver.
High driver. And what about the taxes? Have you thought at all, or is there a discussion on and it would all be speculative at this point, but there would be an opportunity to generate tax income. Does that offset any of the concerns about what you mentioned in the workforce and then, of course, driving?
In my view, no, because we're going to have other social problems kind of ramp up like we do with alcohol. And just because alcohol is bad doesn't mean we need to add another bad thing. I
thought it was interesting also, Senator Coghill, that the money coming into the initial drive was from from a Washington state-based agency. I thought that was interesting. So it isn't, pun intended, it wasn't homegrown. And secondly, it's so early in the conversation that Colorado and Washington, I'd say the smart play is to just wait it out, see what happens in those states. And if you really feel fervently about it in this state, generate something on a local basis. But it's too early, too soon, and there's too many unknowns.
And on the minimum wage, my first answer is just say no. And I'll tell you why. I understand people want to work and get a good paying wage, and in Alaska, generally that's been true. But this is a question of how do you get people into the immediate workforce? How do I get 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds to start a career anywhere? If we push it up to where employers just can't do it anymore, those are the people who are not going to have the experience necessary to get into the workforce. And I'm sorry to say that, because even some of our the waiters and waitresses, they may work for a minimum wage, but they get huge tips. And those are rare circumstances probably as well. But in my view, all it is social engineering, saying everybody's got to pay this, and it never lets the market determine what's available. Now, to be fair, in Alaska, we're probably not going to be a big player in that anyway, but it's that social engineering aspect of it that I just don't like.
I agree with you. And my daughter is 18. She is a hostess. She's not able to serve, of course, till she's 21, but she's a hostess and makes the minimum wage, I think is $7.75 right now or whatever it is, and brings home a bundle of tips based on our meritocracy. Put a smile on your face, deliver good service. You make more than what the minimum threshold is every single time.
Sure, and it gives people incentive to work, there's no doubt. But if we say we have to go up higher, I can tell you there's some small businesses just are not going to be able to move the kind of work they want to do.
Absolutely.
We're going to see it putting stress on them. And we need entry-level positions. We just need them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Senator, in closing, I become aware that you've done work inside the jails with a ministry in the jails. Is that something I just find that fascinating? What would be your takeaway that now that you've done that, you've been in the prison system in that capacity and ministering to those folks? What's your takeaway from it, and would you recommend other people volunteer in that way?
Absolutely. First of all, they're human beings, right? They're being held accountable. That's true. And maybe there are better ways to keep them accountable. Under Senate Bill 64, you're seeing I'm exploring ways to do that. Jailing them sometimes is the only way, though, to keep the public safe. and yet they're human beings, and they're worthy of appreciation, love, respect, and some direction and challenge. So just like the victims, though, quite frankly, a lot of people get extra help in the jail. The victims quite often are left without resources, too. So I've worked in both worlds.
Senator John Coghill, I admire you, and I thank you very much for your time today, sir, and it's been a real privilege.
Thank you, Christopher. Have a pleasant day.